Hi, ladies. Welcome back to the Empowered Expat Wife podcast. I'm very excited to be here with you and with the lovely Mariam Navaid Ottimofiore. Welcome, Mariam.
Thank you, Camilla. Thank you so much, and for pronouncing my name perfectly.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
So, some of you may know Mariam from her very famous and popular blog called And Then We Moved To. So, just in case that's what you knew her as, her alias. So let me tell you a little bit about Mariam before we dive into this interview, where we really want to tackle, what to do when life gets messy abroad. And it does. We know that it does. And how we can still really embrace it and make the best of it. So that will be our topic for today. I'm very excited. And yeah, so let's get started. So, Mariam is an expat author, a writer, researcher, and economist. She's written one of my favorite expat books, This Messy Mobile Life, which is a great read. So, if you haven't read it, you need to check it out. I'm going to link that also in the session notes. And Mariam really, she speaks from experience because she has been an expat all her life. To date, she has lived in 10 countries, both as an expat child with her parents, with her family, and as an expat adult, which are the Kingdom of Bahrain, the United States, Pakistan, where she's originally from, the United Kingdom, Germany, Denmark, Singapore, the United Arab Emirates, Ghana, and Portugal. That's a really impressive list.
Thank you.
And she's married to a German Italian husband.
Mhm.
They have three lovely German, Pakistani, Italian kids. And in honor, let me say, of this messy mobile life, you guys relocated in the middle of a pandemic. You were very, very pregnant, and you relocated from Ghana to Lisbon just about half a year ago. So, wow. Tell us a little bit more about your journey because it's so interesting. It's something that we can all learn so much from.
Thank you so much, Camilla, first of all, and thank you for having me. I think it's a real pleasure to just sit here and talk to you about our crazy, messy mobile lives, because I think you're someone who really gets it from your own experience. And I think part of it is also just acknowledging it out to each other.
Mhm.
I really didn't want to write about how to live a perfect life abroad or how to make that perfect your best move, because I think those kinds of titles can be quite misleading. And I like to really portray reality, the reality of life abroad. And in my opinion, the reality is that once you leave the familiar and exchange it for a life in the unfamiliar, your life will be messy.
Right.
So let's just pause and acknowledge that a globally mobile life is a messy life. And that's how it's been for me. And it's something I'm very open and honest about, because I think, why do I need to sugarcoat it and pretend that I have everything figured out when the reality is, in each country that I move to, I'm learning so much. And I think that's truly the beauty for me, that, yeah, 10 countries, but, I still don't know so many things. And the learning process never stops, right? So it's been a real journey. It's been a privilege to move abroad, but it's also been a real exercise in getting to know myself. And I think that's where you and I really connect, in how can we share those learnings so that other people who are perhaps going through this process can, apply them, and it can make their life perhaps a little bit easier. So that's
Absolutely.
for the lovely introduction.
And that is so important. And I think, as you said, right, sometimes we see, especially on Instagram, because obviously Instagram is so great for beautiful visuals, and we just see
Yeah,
this bright side of a life abroad and of maybe even digital nomads that are just living the dream and everything's sunshine and
right.
beaches and smoothies. But the reality, I mean, it is life, right? So no life is perfect. Life
Yeah.
back home wasn't perfect. And there are very regular things that we also have to do abroad. It's not all adventurous. And
There's a lot of laundry happening in between those Instagram
exactly, there's
posts.
laundry, there's paperwork, there's, the usual. And yeah. But so then, speaking of this messy mobile life, what would you say were your messiest moments that you want to share with us?
Oh gosh, there have been so many, Camilla. I probably should just choose like the top three to share with you
Okay.
today. I think probably the messiest. Let me just back up, and I think you already mentioned that. But I started moving for my dad's career, and then I moved for my own studies and my own career, and now I currently move for my husband's career. So I've sort of experienced moving from all different angles, and I've also moved for love. I've moved for all sorts of reasons. Um, but the hardest or one of the messiest moves that I made was actually when I moved to Berlin to be with my husband. I think that was the first move I made as an expat partner, and I think that was the messiest one because I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I'm used to moving. I've moved so many times before. You know, I moved all over the U.S. I moved to Pakistan, I moved to England, and back. But I found that moving for your partner or for your husband's job was a completely different ball game altogether. And the reason it was one of the messiest moves is because I was stripped of my identity. I left six-figure, banking, investment banking job in Houston, Texas, to move to Berlin, and I felt I had become illiterate overnight. I mean, I didn't speak the language. I couldn't even understand the, announcements on the U-Bahn or the S-Bahn, and I felt completely dependent on my partner, which, as you know, as a relationship coach, that's not the best way to start your marriage or any relationship, right?
Right.
It came to a point, Camilla, where you wouldn't believe it because I'm a very big extrovert, but I actually was afraid to answer the phone because I didn't know what the person on the other end would be saying, and it was such an uncomfortable experience. So I was only 23, I should point out, and back
Mhm.
then, Camilla, I knew nobody who was an expat partner or who had moved to a country where they didn't speak the language, or to a country where they were unemployed, or to a country where they couldn't find any kind of real sense of purpose. So I think that was the first shock.
Mm.
And back then, I didn't have the resources that I have now available at my fingertips. This was before even we had iPhones. This was 2006. And so it was just a different expat world back then. It was a
Yeah.
very messy move, predominantly what it did to me in terms of identity. But it also, I like to say that the cities that usually, that break us are also the cities that make us. And so Berlin was the one that brought me to my knees, but also built me right back up, right? Somehow it's that duality that we experience as expats, right? Where we just,
Yeah.
it's like the hardest places end up leaving the biggest imprint on you. And
Right.
so it's a
And
really
I can,
fun way to acknowledge that. Yeah.
yeah, I can so relate because I would also say the first move that I did for my husband. So
Mhm.
before that, I had moved abroad for studies and work like you.
Yeah.
And the first move that I made for him, and it was also to him, it was to his hometown. So he had like the, what do you call it with the in the football game when like the home team has the benefit, right?
Yeah. The hometown advantage or
The
the
hometown
hometown
advantage.
advantage.
And it's
Exactly.
all like it's all your circle of friends, like as in his circle of friends, it's his environment. And yeah, I think I would also say that was definitely the hardest, and just kind of
Mhm.
finding your place, but also
Mhm.
finding your independence, and
Yeah.
not just this, I'm the side gig here.
Absolutely. I think the first time you do it, it's always a shock. And I know I was very naive when I did it at the age of 23, no preparation, nothing. So it really was a steep learning curve, you know. I think the second messiest move I made, gosh, there've been so many. Or the second messiest moment was, moving to Dubai and my husband coming home one day and saying, company just shut down their Dubai headquarters. The price of oil is up, and this is the Middle East. And one day you have a job, and the next day you don't. And we literally felt like the carpet or the rug had just been snatched from under our feet, because Dubai is a very unique place to live. There are many, many, laws to follow. And long story short, if you don't have a job, you basically can't have a visa, or you can't live in Dubai.
Yeah.
And so, just a very stressful situation where one day everything's fine, the next day the company's like, we're going to shut down our Dubai headquarters. And what do you do? And the reality of expat life can really hit you when you've got no security, or when your stay in a country is completely tied to, your employment. And if your employment goes, you don't know if you can even send your kids to school the next day, right? What do you do? I mean, your whole life is called into question. I like to explain it like, if you've never left your home, and let's say you lose your job, it's a big thing, but at least you don't lose your home. At least you don't lose your friends or your community or where you live. And at least your kids can go and continue on with their schooling. But in a place like Dubai, if you lose your job, your whole life is called into question. So that was a very messy moment for us.
Wow, that sounds really messy.
A very stressful moment. But, and we ended up being one of the lucky ones, because my husband works in HR. So they shut down the whole office. 50 people, 55 people were without a job from one day to the next. And because my husband is HR, he was just one of the two people left on the ground to oversee the entire closure and manage the whole legal side of it. So we ended up having a job and ended up staying in Dubai to send our kids to school, and ended up doing 2 more years of our posting. So we ended up staying there for 4 years. But that was a very messy moment, and it showed us just the unpredictability of this life that we sign up for, but we don't always think it's going to happen to us, but it can, and it does. A lot
Unpredictability is, I mean, the catchword, I think. How many times have I heard, ooh, I think we're going to be moving soon. No, actually, we're not. I think we're going to move there soon. Okay. And I'm trying to, I am Austrian after all. So I'm trying to like adapt to this and like, get used to the thought of, okay, I'm going to move whatever. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, oh, no. It's called off. Actually, maybe now we're going somewhere else. Oh my God.
Absolutely.
So,
I always joke I should have written a book on all the places we didn't move to.
Oh, yeah.
That would be another long, few chapters right then and there. But yeah, there have been so many messy moments. I mean, our container got lost when we arrived in Ghana, and lost. And the irony is, when your husband works for the shipping company, Camilla, that's shipping your stuff, and then your container ends up being, somewhere in West Africa by the side of a dirt road, where nobody can get to it. It was very stressful. But to be very honest, I think my latest move from Ghana to Portugal was probably the most stressful, or the messiest move that we have done in the middle of a pandemic, and being pregnant. I'm always pregnant in the move, so that was nothing new. Each time I've had a child, I've been pregnant and moved in between the pregnancies, which is a tradition I need to stop now. But it was just a combination, Camilla, of so many things. We were evacuated from Ghana. The border shut down. We couldn't find a flight. There was no way to actually leave, so we had to be evacuated on a charter flight by the Italian embassy and flown to Rome. And we made it then to Germany, where my husband is from, and a week later we made it to Lisbon. And the irony is, my husband and I came to Lisbon just to get a lot of bureaucracy done, because of COVID, we couldn't do our look-see. We couldn't, do so many things we were supposed to do. So we were just supposed to be here for a week, and we were going to go back, get the kids who were at the grandparents, and then all of us would come back. But then, as you know, I went into preterm labor just on day 4 of being here in Lisbon. So one minute I'm opening up a bank account, and doing all the things that you're doing when you're new in a country, trying to get a social security number, etc. And the next moment, I'm in an ambulance being rushed to one of Lisbon's maternity hospitals, and it very, very stressful. Don't speak the language again, no clue where I'm sent. And doing it all alone was probably the most stressful part, because my husband wasn't allowed to come in, wasn't allowed to be there because of COVID regulations. So I think, that was probably probably the messiest move or the messiest moment thus far in our
I
journey.
can only imagine. And I was obviously, reading about it as it was
Mhm.
happening. And I was also pregnant with a baby boy. And it hits you like, right, when something happens to someone, it's always really hard to see that, I think. But then when you can kind of relate to the situations, I felt with you so much. And I'm just so glad that everything worked out well.
Yeah,
And
we're just very grateful. Thank you so much. We're very grateful. Everything worked out. And again, I mean, I think, and I'll probably talk a little bit about this, but I feel like my Mola saved me because and of course I'll explain what the Mola is, but because we lead these messy mobile lives, we build up a lot of shores of resilience. And I feel like that has been sewn into my Mola. So when the going gets tough, it's my Mola that comes to my rescue. And where someone else would have given up, I come very close to it, but I don't throw in the towel. I mean, I was really challenged, don't get me wrong, really pushed to my limit. In the end, I gave birth all by myself alone. My husband wasn't allowed in. And it was incredibly traumatic, incredibly stressful, not something that I even have had the courage to write about yet. Um, but it's just, in those moments when it's make or break, it's as if your whole life just flashes in front of you, and you know that you're going to make it. You've got people supporting you from all around the world, and you know that it's tough, but you know that you can get through it because you've been in that position, different varying maybe degrees of that, but you've overcome obstacles before.
yeah,
So somehow,
grown those muscles.
experience pulls you through. Yeah.
So tell us about Mola for those listeners who are not familiar with this concept, which is such a beautiful metaphor, and it's something from Mariam's book. So tell us about this concept of the Mola.
Sure. Camilo, when I was writing this book, I was in Dubai. I was trying to come up with a metaphor to match this life that we lead. This mesh of different countries and identities and cultures and languages and all the moving that we do. And I was, thinking maybe it's like a marble cake. All the different batter and the different swirls, and you can't predict how it's going to come out or how it's going to look, once you take it out from the oven. And I thought about, the pomegranate, which is my favorite fruit, because it's pretty boring from the outside, right? But from the inside, you've got these red ruby jewels. And sometimes I felt like that's what we were like, we we had all this richness inside that we were only showed to certain people who we thought would get our experience. But in the end, Camilla, I discovered a mola. And in a nutshell, what a mola is, it's basically quite simply just a shirt that you or I would wear. But it comes from South America, and it specifically comes from the Guna tribe in South America in modern day Colombia and Panama. And the most interesting thing about a mola is the way that it's made. And that's what spoke to me as a globally mobile person. Um, you make the mola by hand, so it's stitched by hand. And how it works is that you take several layers of brightly colored cloth and you start layering them one on top of the other. And then you cut and fold and stitch it. So certain layers start to come out and certain other layers are repressed, or they're hidden beneath the surface and you can't see them. And I thought that's actually what our expat lives were like. We had all these stories and experiences and so many rich things, but we were keeping a few things hidden and exposing the rest to the world, to our friends or to our family. And the mola is like a very unique garment. So each person who makes it, it's a very unique thing based on who they are. And when you turn the mola over, because it's made in, reverse applique, it's stitched in the reverse applique form, the mola shows a very distinct design that's unique to the person who made it. And that really spoke to me too, because I felt like we each have such a unique story and such a unique experience that your Mola may not look like mine because you had a different experience. And so I really wanted something that was so powerful, like a concept and a metaphor that was really powerful to this messy mobile life that we lead, where we are building layer upon layer of identity and stitching in our cultures and our languages and our identities that are constantly changing. And then who are we in the end? Like, what does our design look like? What do we show to the world? And I love the idea of it being a shirt because I feel like a mola is something, it's a garment that you wear and you wear it proudly and you show it to the world proudly. You don't just stitch a mola and then, shove it in your closet where it gathers dust. But the whole idea of wearing what you are proudly really spoke to me as well. And so I decided to use this mola, this basically a South American shirt, as a concept for explaining this messy mobile life. And then I went a little bit one step further and made the MOLA an acronym as well. So the MOL and A stand for my toolbox of how to sort of go from mess to magic.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. Ah, such a great metaphor. And I think, and that's something that I always say as well, it's so important to look at our lives, be they
Yeah.
lives across borders or be they multicultural lives where you just
Mhm.
have different influences, even if you live in one place and you don't move, but you have different influences that shape you. And to look
Absolutely.
at that so holistically, right? And not like these different parts of you, or in the case of expats, not to think in terms of assignment. Okay, so now I'm 4 years here and then I'm 4 years there. No, it's all part of your life story, and you have to really make it count also. So I love
Absolutely.
this
You have
idea.
to stitch it together. And that's why the whole metaphor of stitching something together really spoke to me. And I hope it speaks to other people as well, other families, multicultural families, multilingual families, and mobile families, because I think that's what we're all doing. And I wasn't aware that that's what I was doing. I built up all my layers on a very subconscious level, as I'm sure you did as well. But it's only when I look at it through my mola do I then understand, okay, well, I reacted to this because actually this is what my mola looks like. That's what I put in. So it's a way also for you to understand your own journey. And
Yeah.
it's a way for you to capture your family's journey, because let's face it, a lot of us are moving with our family. And I felt that there was no proper framework for defining how it is to move with a family. Because it's a completely different ballgame from just moving by yourself, as you know, or even just with your partner. And then you add dependence, young dependence in the mix, and it's really quite a challenging and quite a multi-layered process in and of itself.
The responsibility, right, that you have, so that
Yeah.
like you made this choice, or maybe your employer did, but it's kind of your responsibility that everything works out well and everyone's fine. And I feel like this is really the biggest pressure, like for me, moving abroad, thinking of, will my kids be fine, will they be made fun of because they have an accent, or these are the things that bother me. It's not so much about myself, because as you said, right, you grow resilient and you start having your toolkit, and I guess the experience helps, but just this whole yeah, doing it with your family, I think it definitely adds a lot of pressure.
Mhm.
um, so, what are your tips for other families, other mothers listening to this now, thinking, "Oh my God, my life is so messy right now." I mean, the pandemic is probably enough to say that life is messy, but then there are other things, and everyone obviously has their own problems and challenges. So, what are your tips to kind of you know master them and thrive and overcome them?
It's such a great question, Camilla, and a topic I'm really passionate about. I think maybe I'll list 5 tips because I can go on and on about this, But I think the most important thing is to recognize that transition. is handled very differently by everybody in your family. So your husband or your wife may be handling it very differently, yourself, and then your kids, depending on their ages. And the most important thing to recognize is that each transition involves a loss and a gain, and in fact, several losses and several gains. And the losses can be tangible or they can be intangible. Maybe the kids lose some friends, that's a tangible loss, or maybe they lose the benefit or the experience of hearing a language around them. That's an intangible loss. And so what I advise to parents is that, first of all, recognize that the transition involves losses and gains, and then rejoice in the gains, but don't forget to mourn the losses. And don't forget to help your child do that, because that's what we call moving in a healthy way, where you're not suppressing your emotions or your child's emotions. In fact, you're teaching them to process all the emotions, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you're giving them permission to acknowledge that the move might also come with feelings of loneliness or feelings of, displacement. And I think as parents, Camilla, our instinct is always to fix things, to comfort, right? But one of the big tips that I give to parents is before you comfort before you encourage. Don't just sweep all their feelings under the rug. You have to acknowledge what they're going through. You have to give them that space to be able to acknowledge that. That's really important. And I think it's okay to say to your 8-year-old, well, I know this is not easy for you to move to Lisbon because you're struggling to make friends, and Mama is struggling too. She hasn't made many friends yet out there. It's really okay to be honest and open about it, but always also try to sort of allow them that openness to express how they feel. Especially for a lot of us who grew up as third culture kids, we never have a choice. We're told we're moving because your dad has found a new job, and that can take away it can be lead to a lot of loss of control for many kids. So there are a few different aspects that I mention in the book as well. The first is, like, when you move, you have to make sure you can give your kids some sense of closure. That's really important for third culture kids. And one of the things we struggled with in our latest move was moving in the middle of a pandemic. We couldn't give the kids that sense of closure that normally we could through goodbye parties or different things. And now we had to create our own sense of closure. We had to take a leaf from the garden or a pebble from your favorite sidewalk and say goodbye, because that closure is important, especially, I would say, for young TCKs. So that's something that I would encourage parents of TCKs, especially moms of TCKs, to do, to keep that in mind. And then, of course, there's the competence. When you move to a new country, you have to give your kids some level of competence. And it could really depend, depending on their ages. I mean, if they are old enough to be able to answer the phone in the local language, or old enough to be able to take a bus or take public transportation to go somewhere, it's important that you give them that level of competence and help them to feel that level of comfortability in their new place, because that can make a big difference to how settled they feel. And one tip, and not everyone agrees with me, but I think you should give your kids some level of control in the whole moving process. It could be something as simple, Camilla, as giving them a box to pack and saying, fine, you're in charge of this box. Or it could even be involving them, if they're older, in a decision on where to live or which neighborhood to live in. But depending on the kids' ages, it's important that you allow them some level of control. You don't want them to grow up and then deal with what we call unresolved grief in expat and PCK literature. And unresolved grief builds up over time. And that's why I mentioned how to move in a healthy way, so that unresolved grief doesn't come back to bite us, because that can lead to all sorts of issues, mental health issues or depression or commitment issues. And TCK research shows that, once you are able to move with your kids and you allow them that competence, that level of control, and that sense of closure, that their chances of them developing unresolved grief are significantly lowered. So that's what your aim should be as a parent, where you don't want your
I
kids
love
to grow up one day and say, oh, well, I never got to process this. So the goal is processing, helping your kids to process it as you're going through it. That is very important. And Camilla, you have made so many moves. You know that, yes, a move can be, very stressful, right? But it's so important that you don't let the stress of the move overtake your child's basic need to be comforted or loved. Cross-cultural kids in this sense are no different from a normal kid or a kid that doesn't move, because they still have that innate sense of wanting to just be comforted and wanting to be loved. So don't let the stress of the move overwhelm you so much that you aren't able to do that for your child. I think that's what my advice would be. And of course, yeah, other advices would be, what we recommend, as you know, like having, portable traditions that you can do no matter where you are, whether it's, ending your Friday night with pizza or having pancakes every Sunday or whatever it is, But when in a world where everything is changing, it's important to have that stability. And
I think so too. That's something that we really tried very hard. I mean, our kids were smaller, so it's still, I mean, they're still very dependent on us. But that's definitely something that from the get-go, like intuitively, we said, okay, we need these traditions. And yes, and I love what you said about not letting this grief sort of accumulate, and helping your kids to go through all of the emotions, which is something that we all should do anyway, right? So even for the mothers or the women listening, um, you'll also experience some losses, and it's okay. And I think sometimes what gets in the way of expressing these emotions is feeling guilty for
mhm,
having them in the first place, right? Because your life is actually good, and maybe there are even some people who look at it and think, oh, it's so exciting, and you have this sense of guilt, like I should not be complaining, but actually I'm not fine. And so I
mm.
think also, just as a message to all of you, it is totally legitimate to struggle. And I think we all know that, but then to the next step to actually say, yes, I am struggling and I'm
Oh,
expressing it.
absolutely. Absolutely.
That's
It's so
probably
important. And again, it all comes back to saying it's a messy mobile life. It's not a perfect mobile life. And you have to not be afraid of the mess. I think I've learned this, Camilla. You have to embrace the mess. And if you go in with realistic expectations and knowing things will get messy, I feel like it's a great coping mechanism because you know this is a crazy, messy life you signed up for. So you're not going to be surprised when things don't go according to plan. And in a way, you're going to be able to develop such great mechanisms of bouncing back because you're expecting things to be messy or to get messy. And so you're not expecting a smooth sailing. I
Mm,
think the last point, Camilla, that I would make, and this is not just for TCKs, but also for us adults. And it's something that, Ruth Van Rieken, who wrote the book on third culture kids, says a lot. And she's contributed to This Messy Mobile Life. And with her permission, I tweaked one of her very famous quotes and added my 2 cents on it. And Ruth's, one of her favorite things that she's remembered for is what she says to TCKs and also to parents of TCKs, that um, unpack your bags and plant your trees. And that is in essentially she's saying to live in the moment regardless of where you move to. And with her permission, I added unpack your bags, plant your trees, and make your mola
right.
in the book, because I feel like that's just the last step of acknowledging the journey. But it's so important to help your kids live in the moment, and not worry about how long they're staying or where they're going to move to next or what their life's going to look like in 5 years. As you know, in expat life, you don't really know what your life is going
Yeah.
to look like in 5 years. But the idea is to help your kids live in the moment, and that's something that can be quite easy to say but harder to do in practice. this. And even as adults, we struggle with it. But the idea is to live fully, to commit fully to where you are. And, unpacking your bags is usually something that we do, but planting our trees is something that we're quite hesitant to do because we think,
Absolutely.
oh, I won't be there to watch that, tree grow or blossom or wither or whatever it is, right? And
Yeah.
so, the duality of our experience is quite important to acknowledge. And I think if we keep that in mind while we're parenting, it can really help us.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, as you said, a lot of times the planting trees is even like a self-protection mechanism, right?
Mhm.
That you don't even want to expose yourself to
Yeah.
everything that comes from really committing to a place and to people and to, whatever it is that is awaiting you there.
Mhm.
And yet, and I had this conversation with Naveen also. We talked
Mhm.
about creating a sense of belonging as an expat. And she also said, and I fully agree with her, not going somewhere with a temporary state of mind, even though you know it is temporary. You know
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at the back of your mind, you know it, but you can't let that stop you from living your life fully and completely and living your life as if you're not going to be moving,
Exactly. Because
because that's the
otherwise,
only way to live.
yeah,
Otherwise, you fail by default at expat
exactly.
life, in
And you
my
can never
opinion.
reach your full potential. You cannot reach a friendship's full
Mhm.
potential. You cannot enjoy this place fully if
Yeah.
you do not, right? So I think that's definitely a key message here to everyone. And I love this, and I'm gonna steal it also now. Unpack
Yeah,
your
you're
bags
very
and plant
welcome.
your trees and
Yeah.
stitch your
And
mola.
and that's your Mola. I feel like the last part about the Mola is only just so that you're very aware of your life story.
Mhm.
And I feel like most of us just we don't look back or ask ourselves what have all these experiences led to? Like who am I now? We're so caught up in the day-to-day moving, and we've got kids and we've got jobs and stressful lives, and I mean, we often forget or we don't have the time to reflect on our life journey. And so the MOLA is to help you see your life journey and see what's important to you and what you put in. And I feel like that's just the last part of living this life really consciously and embracing all of it, all the messiness
Yeah.
and making it part of your life story.
Exactly. And that is a coping mechanism in itself.
Hmm.
I recently did an episode on expat fatigue, and all those problems. I just bunched them up and just called them expat fatigue. It can be different things, but just this feeling like I'm just a little fed up now for whatever reason. And
We've all been
oh
there.
yes, and I think a lot of times what's at the root is not having this long-term perspective, not understanding how does this make sense for my life, what is this in my mola, so to speak, right? And
Exactly.
I think if you are clear on that, and that's probably also something that you have to reflect on, journal on, and be really
Mhm.
intentional about, and probably even try and just find whatever you can that makes this move or this relocation, this stay somewhere, makes sense as part of your mola, as part of your life story. And uh, and I think that will definitely clear out a lot of those little problems that otherwise start to surface because we're not really sure what we're actually doing there or why we are in the situation. So I absolutely love the mola metaphor.
Thank you. I think it's a powerful metaphor if we use it. And I think what it really helps is that once you know what your mola it looks like, you can share it with others. So the idea was that you can share your mola with the relocation company who's moving you. You can share your mola with the school, the local school, or the international school that your child will be attending. You can share the mola with the HR of the company that's moving you, or the embassy that's posting you or sending you abroad. The idea is the clearer we are about our mola, the easier it is to show your mola to the different global stakeholders involved in the moving process. And then you're actually, on the same page, because usually we're not all on the same page, right? We're looking at the relocation from very different angles. And the idea was to bring the focus back on the family, bring the focus back on the client, the people who are moving, and A, for them to know what their Mola looks like and their life story, and then B, helping them to communicate that to their major stakeholders so that moving for them is done in a way that's beneficial and it's helpful. And I think you have to be quite realistic about it as well. Maybe your Mola shows you that you might need to delay your move right now because you want your kids to finish the academic year or term. These are very realistic factors to consider, and you should definitely not ever ignore them. I for sure have delayed a move because I wanted my kids to finish a term, or I wanted them to start at the beginning of the term. You want to make the whole settling in process as easy or as smooth as you can. And so that's a conversation you have to take then with the HR of the company who wants you to move in March, and say, I'm sorry, but this is what our Mola looks like. This is what's important to us. Our prior experience taught us our kids don't do very well moving in the middle of the academic year, etc. And you then know exactly what you're going to ask for. So you're so clear about who you are. It's a lot easier to then communicate that effectively, and I think it makes a world of difference.
Beautiful. Wow, this was so value packed. Thank you so much for sharing all of your tips and advice and wisdom with us.
You're
Um,
very
for,
welcome.
for those listeners who are like, okay, now I want more of that, go and get Mariam's book. You can get it anywhere on Amazon, right?
Yes.
And can you tell us where else can people follow you, find out more about you? Um, yeah.
Yeah, oh, sure. I mean, you're welcome to email me. You're welcome to, and I'll give Camilla my email to put on. You're welcome to find me on Facebook. I write a blog called andthenwemovetoDot.com. So you can go to my blog and check that out. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram under @and then we move to. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn because on LinkedIn I discuss things more from a relocation point of view. So if you're interested in hearing about that, you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Mariam Navaid Ottimofiore on LinkedIn, and then we move to everywhere else. So you're welcome to definitely connect with me. I love to hear from people, and I'm usually very quick in replying. I respond to everyone. So
Great. That's excellent. Now, before we wrap this up, can you tell us what is your favorite thing about this messy mobile life? What's the best thing, would you say?
ooh, such a good question, Camilla. I think I would have to say that my favorite thing is that the learning never stops, and that this messy mobile life keeps throwing challenges, but also great adventures, bringing great adventures my way. So I love the fact that just like your Mola is a constantly developing design, I think that's what keeps it interesting. You don't know what it looks like in the end, at least I don't yet. And I feel like that's really important to sort of not get complacent and to take each experience, each move, each country to really learn from it. I feel like your mindset and your attitude makes such a difference as to how you approach your globally mobile life. And in fact, in my acronym, MOLA, the A stands for adventure. And in the end, I think that is the best part that I love. And the reason I keep doing this so many times, because the adventure you go on is just incredible. There's that outer adventure, and then of course the more interesting one is the inner adventure that's going inside of you, and who you're becoming and what you're learning and what you're experiencing. And I think that's truly the best part for me, that when you say yes to this life outside of your comfort zone, there are such amazing experiences and surprises that come your way. And I think that really boils down to how you approach it. I've seen a lot of expats, Camilla, who have a lot of experience, but they don't have the right mindset for living this life, whereas somebody who's maybe left their home for the very first time approaches it with that adventure mindset. And in an adventure, everything is possible. And adventures are messy, and adventures have no end dates. And, that's really what you have to keep thinking of, that it's not like a 2-week vacation to Thailand and you come back. That's not an adventure when you know you're going to be back on your couch looking at your holiday pictures. Adventures are, just like I said, they're messy. They don't have end dates. And you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you'll come back. You don't know when you'll come back. And you don't know how it's going to change you. But I think that's the best part about this messy mobile life, that, the learning continues. And if you allow yourself to keep on learning, it's truly something so valuable, such a valuable
I love that. I love that. And I have a feeling, from people listening, those, who are actually really embracing their mobile lives, they will feel like, where will I go next now after listening to this?
process.
And those who are maybe on the fence, like, do I want to continue being an expat, or would I actually rather go home or whatever? They're like, you know what? Yeah, it's an adventure. I'm gonna give it another try.
The thing about an adventure is that it could be a good adventure, it could be a bad adventure as well, right? That's what I say, like it could go either way. But a lot of it, I think, depends on you and what you make out of it. In our last posting, Camilla, as you know, we were in the middle of West Africa in a malaria, zone with young kids, something I thought I'd never do. I'm like, who are these crazy people who move to malaria countries with young children? And then that was me, and I realized it sounds crazy to people who've never done it. Like, why would you go put yourself there, in that situation? But again, of course, things don't work there the way you would expect them to in Austria, right? There are broken pavements, and the electricity comes and goes, and all of those things. But either you can focus your whole day on that, complaining about the traffic you're stuck in, or you can look out of your car window and admire the beautiful, colorful African kente cloth that the woman is wearing, who's carrying a basket on her head, full of peanuts and avocados, and you really can choose your adventure, is I guess what I'm trying to say. You can make it an adventure, or you can make it just something that you're just, you don't value. So it also depends on us. How much value are we putting on it? And in my eyes, the whole experience of living abroad is the most valuable thing you can do for yourself, and I think also for your family. So I put a lot of value on it. And as a result, I feel like it gives me a lot in return, which I'm sure you would probably agree with.
I absolutely do. And I loved that we continued this conversation that was like almost finished, and now we continued on a little bit.
I'm so sorry, because I will let you like sign off, because otherwise we'll just go on and on and
No,
on.
no, no, no. But this
Oh,
is gold. I love this. So I'm so glad we, we stuck around for that.
yeah.
So
No,
anyway,
pleasure.
Mariam, thank you so, so much for coming on. I'm very excited about sharing this with our audience. And yes, we'll be in touch. And I will be back with all of our listeners next week, next Thursday.
Thank you so much, Camilla. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.